Needless Things Podcast. Hey, Phantomaniacs! Welcome to the newest episode of the Needless Things Podcast, where we talk about toys, movies, music, and all manner of pop culture dorkery. I am your host, Dave, and today, Needless Con continues. We're heading into the weekend where Dragon Con would have taken place, and there's still lots of fun to be had, Needless Things convention style. Today's episode is a special panel featuring the hosts of the Audible Interlude G.I. Joe podcast. We sat down and had sort of a roundtable conversation that's very different from episodes of Audible Interlude. This is more of a panel, whereas those are based around segments, and it's a great G.I. Joe podcast that I'm very proud of, and I hope you check it out. Today you can get to know the hosts of the Audible Interlude podcast. Before we get to that, more Dragon Con memories that I want to share. Just that being away from the regular world is so much of the magic of Dragon Con. I've talked in past years about how important the costume community is to the whole Dragon Con experience, and the fact that it takes place in hotels and not a convention center, it's almost like going to Disney World, where once you get in, you're immersed in this separate reality where your day-to-day problems get to fade away for a few days and not be quite so pressing. And a big part of that is yes, the location being, even though it's in the middle of downtown Atlanta, being somewhat isolated away, because you can stay in those hotels the whole weekend. You could technically spend the entirety Thursday through Monday without stepping outside once. Now, I don't do that because it would take effort. Like, it's very easy to just walk outside to get from place to place, even though it smells terrible. It's easy to do. But you could stay indoors the entire time if you really wanted to. But the cosplay community is another key factor of that, because when you're walking around these hotels, there's just no way to not feel magical seeing all of these people in costumes just hanging out, taking pictures, drinking, partying, talking, being cool. But, you look in one direction and you've got like a knight, in another direction you've got a superhero, another direction you've got some kind of strange creature that you don't even know what it's from. It's probably, anime, but who knows? And yes, I understand the probably anime thing is a little worn out at this point, but it's also true. But that immersion that is so unique to Dragon Con is absolutely one of the things that I find to be so appealing and so wonderful about it. And it's what makes it so, it's one of the ways that you can enjoy it. For me personally, I go down there and I work hard all weekend. Now, don't get me wrong, I party. But I have decided that the way I enjoy Dragon Con is to do a whole lot of hard work in the year leading up to it, and then to totally bust my ass all weekend doing panels and game shows and anything else that I have the opportunity to do. But you can also go down there and just hang the whole time in this magical, different world of costumes and people partying. There's so many different ways that it's a special and unique convention. And again, I'll say it's a shame we can't do it this year, but at the same time, I also think it's kind of awesome, because next year, how much fun are we going to have? How much more are we going to appreciate it? Because as much as I love Dragon Con, it's, maybe some of us took it for granted a little bit. Maybe there were some things about it that I was a little worn out on. Maybe I was a little burned out in some ways. And now I'm getting an involuntary break that wouldn't have happened. And it's going to make me love it and appreciate it and work that much harder next year to make it the incredible experience that it is. So that's kind of my Dragon Con reflection for this week. If you have anything you want to share about Dragon Con, please shoot an email to phantomtroublemaker@gmail.com. Jump into the Needless Things Podcast Facebook group. Shoot us a message there. We will be wrapping all of this up with a very special Dragon Con episode, and I would love to hear from you guys. Your own memories, your own thoughts, your own speculation about what makes Dragon Con so special. Please, jump into the inboxes and let us know. You can record a voice memo. We'll play it on the show. You can write something out, and I'll read it however you want to convey that to us. We'd love to hear it and share it here on the Needless Things podcast. So before we get to this week's Needless Con panel, let's talk a little bit about some news. Okay, so first I want to hit the site news that I'm just including as news because I like using that little sting. Up on the Needless Things YouTube channel this week, I opened and unbox, because that's the magic word the kids love, and review the glow-in-the-dark Baxter Stockman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ultimates action figure from Super 7. I think it's probably the longest title of an action figure ever. It's Bug Zapper Blue Glow. And I'll tell you guys this right now, if you watch the video or if you've already watched it, I've got a couple of notes in there that say something along the lines of, this thing glows way better in person, and it does. It glows like crazy in person. But for some reason, the video and the picture didn't pick up very well. I don't know why, but it glows like crazy. And go watch that video and get the rest of the details if you're interested, and you should be, because I'm in heaven this year between G.I. Joe Classified, Masters of the Universe Origins, and now Super 7's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ultimates finally starting to hit. I am in toy heaven. This is insanity, how great this year is. So anyway, go check that out. Like, subscribe, please share. There are other folks out there getting like 10,000 views on their video, and I don't know how that happens, but I would assume it's because people share them. So please share the Needless Things stuff. I can't reach more people without your help. Also this week, as part of the podcast, I don't like the word network, family, the Needless Things family. Execute Chapter 66 has a new episode about Alphabet Squadron, the new media, what's the word I'm looking for? The new media initiative. That's it. Thank you for bearing with me there. The new media initiative from the comic books and the books. They're going to talk about this Alphabet Squadron thing that's going on that, I'd love to read. I probably should read, but I'm still in the middle of that Prince book that came out, and it's making me cry like every 30 pages. So it's going to take me a minute to get through this thing, because it's hard to read through tears. Other news, actual news outside of the Needless Things podcast family. In an interview for Fantasia, which is some kind of like horror convention or something. I realize I might sound like a dum-dum for not knowing what that is, but honestly, if it's not Dragon Con or San Diego Comic-Con, I don't know. It's hard for me to keep track because I know I'm not going to go to these things. Jason Blum is apparently working with John Carpenter on some sort of reboot, remake, sequel, prequel, continuation, whatever it may be, of The Thing. Now, seeing as The Thing is arguably the greatest horror film of all time, this is very interesting news. I can absolutely see people sort of not being thrilled about it, but if you look at Blumhouse and everything that they've done, if a Thing re-whatever is going to happen, which was inevitable, let's face it, this is the place we want it to happen, I think. So, interesting news. It's about 27 minutes into the interview, and I did post a link to that in the Needless Things Podcast Facebook group, so you can go check that out. Other news, Halloween stores are starting to open, and Halloween stuff is starting to show up in non-Halloween stores. Michael's, we've friend of the show, Bob Burke, is, I think, every year for the past, 4 years, he is the first dude to start posting when the Home Store and Michael's and Hobby Lobby, well, Hobby Lobby does, Autumn Festival or whatever it is, so I don't really count them, but he is the guy who puts up the first pictures of Halloween stuff in stores every year. He not only is he the glow in the dark world champion, he is also the Halloween merchandise finding world champion. So if you're not following him on Instagram, you should be. And we will absolutely be having him back on the show very soon for a special project. But Spirit Halloween stores are starting to pop up. Just be sure you're being safe. Wear your masks, which pretty much everybody is now, so that's cool. And then finally, the big news, DC Fandom happened this past weekend. Our head of research, Ryan, wanted to do a full episode, and I just can't fit it into my schedule. I wish I could have, but in the time frame that I feel like it would have to go up to be relevant, there's just no way. There's too much other stuff going on. So I'm just going to hit on a couple of things. We saw a trailer for the Batman, and it looks awesome. It's not surprising. I mean, Matt Reeves did a trilogy of movies about apes taking over the world that are, as much as I think people look at those movies, Rise, Dawn, and War, and are like, oh yeah, those were really good movies, but they're not in the constant conversation. They're excellent, incredible, amazing, paradigm-shifting movies. They're so freaking good, and he created a tone and a look that's so perfect. It respects the original Planet of the Apes movies while moving the idea and the franchise forward. So I am all about seeing his Batman and what he does, and especially after this trailer that's just sick. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. But Colin Farrell as Penguin is creepy and horrifying and penguin-y, and Pattinson looks and acts to me like Year One Bruce. If you go back and you read Year One again, that not tortured, but unsure, the uncertainty and the darkness and the drive, I see all of that you saw in that Bruce Wayne. I'm so stoked for this movie. Everything about it, the aesthetics, the look, the Batsuit, the Batmobile, the quick glimpse we got of the Batcave, everything about it. I'm very excited, and I'd like to throw this out there. And maybe it's crazy, maybe we don't know enough, maybe we know too much for this to make sense. But at one point, Batman's beating up a gang of Joker goons, basically. Is it possible that this is in the same continuity as the Joaquin Phoenix Joker? And what we're seeing, that gang of Joker goons are inspired by him, as we saw at the end of Joker. Just something that popped into my head and I thought I'd throw out there. Very interesting thought. We also saw the previews for the Gotham Knights video game. I don't think I'm interested in this. It doesn't look like my kind of game. I'll check it out. I'll play it because my son will be getting it for sure. So, I'll give it a shot. But I am much, much, much more interested in the Suicide Squad game. Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, I think is the full title. The trailer was awesome. It's from Rocksteady. I'm in. I'd pre-order it right now if I could. I would pre-order the super deluxe, comes with a statue and a skateboard, whatever. I don't care. Let me pre-order this thing now. I'm super stoked about it. What other news did we have? We saw a new Wonder Woman trailer with a look at Cheetah. CGI was a little dodgy, which is kind of weird considering how much this movie's been delayed. But I like the look of Cheetah. I think she looked cool, and I'm still super stoked for this movie. I'm trying to think what else was there. Oh, the James Gunn Suicide Squad. We finally got a roll call of who is playing who, and Polka Dot Man. Boom, there you go. He's in there. Very exciting. John Cena's Peacemaker costume is lots of Kirby looking stuff in this. I don't know how Fourth World this one's going to get. I loved, and look, I don't know Suicide Squad, particularly the older stuff. I don't know it super well, but I picked up a trade paperback of a story where the Suicide Squad goes to Apocalypse, and if this has any of that, that would be awesome, but I don't think it does. But whatever the case is, it's James Gunn, and everything he does is freaking amazing, so super stoked for that. I like Harley's new gear. I'll buy lots of figures of that for sure. There you go. I think that's about as much news as I need to get out there for this week. All right. I am very proud to be bringing you this panel from the Audible Interlude G.I. Joe podcast. I love doing this show. I wish I could do it every single week, but it's just not possible. The first Monday of every month, you can find a new episode of Audible Interlude, a G.I. Joe podcast, and then every once in a while, when there's enough news or an event to warrant it, we'll record a special supplemental episode. But I'm very proud of this show. I hope you check it out. I've actually gotten some messages from people who aren't even big G.I. Joe fans who've been listening and who love the show. I love the chemistry that I have with Christian and Noel. I think we've got something really special here. So I hope you guys enjoy listening to this panel. And when it's done, if you haven't already, go check out the Audible Interlude podcast, which a new episode will be up on September the 7th. So check it out. I think we're feeling good now. I think we're ready to talk about G.I. Joe. Is everybody ready to talk about G.I. Joe?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to the Audible Interlude, a G.I. Joe podcast panel. Not live, not from Dragon Con, but we're pretending. I am Dave West, the owner and operator of NeedlessThingsPodcast.com and the Needless Things Podcast, which the Audible Interlude podcast is part of that whole thing. Next to me are my fellow hosts. First, Noel, introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Noel Wood, co-host of the Audible Interlude podcast and the proprietor of dorkdroppings.com.
And Christian?
Wow, I just learned something new about Noel. I am Christian Allen. I am also co-host of the Audible Interludes podcast, and I'm here.
Ready to talk some Joes.
We are all lifelong G.I. Joe fans, or at least since 1982, I guess, because we've all been around that long. I found them in a drugstore in 1982, the figures, and then loved the comic, loved the cartoon, and have in one form or another been following along ever since. My current collection is the 25th anniversary stuff, although I am collecting classified, and I am rebuilding my 1982 to 86 vintage collection, but I'm taking my time with that because some of that stuff is pricey, and you have to make some tough decisions. What about you, Christian? What's your G.I. Joe background? Your backstory, if it were?
Yeah, so same sort of thing where I found G.I. Joe at our local 3Ds, which was a department store, and I was totally blown away by all the articulation that they had and was hooked ever since. My current collection is, the 25th anniversary stuff along with some of my vintage vehicles. But I got to tell you, the more we work on this podcast, the more I'm finding stuff that came during the years I wasn't involved with G.I. Joe that it's getting harder and harder not to pull that trigger.
It's weird, isn't it? As we go back, because I'm finding the same thing as I go back and just look stuff up and look at different collections or whatever, I'm finding little bits and pieces of, things that I missed, but also stuff that came out while I was collecting that I guess either I passed on or whatever the case may be, but I realized I don't have it. I had to buy a version 2 Roadblock for my 25th anniversary collection because for some reason I skipped it when it came out. I don't know why, but I've got it now and I'm happy and he's great. And fortunately, the 25th anniversary stuff, like most of it, I'm sure there's some pieces that are quite expensive, but most of it is kind of sitting at pretty decent prices right now.
Ish. Considering, don't know when some of you listeners are going to hear this, but we are still in a pandemic. So, yeah, I think they're still cheaper than import figures. I'll give them that.
Well, you could, obviously there are certain figures that the prices have jumped up a lot on, but you could still build a pretty decent collection for, I think, a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah.
You're just going to run into figures here and there that you're like, oof, if I really want that gung-ho, I'm going to have to shell out.
I mean, you can make the decision, do I want Flint for amount of money, or do I want Tiger Force Flint for $10?
Right.
So
yeah.
You can still get them for sure.
It just may not be exactly the one you want.
You just might need some aesthetic changes.
Noel, what about you?
So I actually preceded 82's G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, because my uncle had given me several of his G.I. Joes, the 12-inch figures from the 70s. One of my favorites was the Mercury space capsule set. Was my favorite toy prior to A Real American Hero, and my dad encouraged me playing with those toys. So when the Real American Hero line came out, it was my father who actually told me about it and continued to encourage me buying those toys. So I got a few of the 82 figures. I got a Vamp with Clutch, and I got Zap and a Cobra officer, actually, were my first few figures, and my collection kind of spawned from there. Had some dark ages, as many of us do during our later adolescence, and but I picked it back up, here and there, and then bought a house about a year and a half ago that had a little bit more space, had some more room to actually display things, so my Joes got to see the light of day for the first time in quite a while. Repaired a bunch of my figures with the O-rings, and wound up starting to do same thing that Dave mentioned he was doing, where I'm going back and filling in holes in my collection. Ideally, my goal would be to have everything complete from 82 to 87. That's a very lofty goal considering the rarity of a lot of those figures, though.
Yeah, that's
and other accessories.
I am discovering that. Well, and that's because my original plan had been like, if I see a Tunnel Rat, I'll just get Tunnel Rat and then find his accessories as I go along. But I have found with most of these figures, it's worth your time and money to just find a complete one and shell out for it. Like, obviously, look at auctions and because of the, current situation, I've been doing all of this from home and not at conventions and stuff. But you look at auctions and compare prices, but man, some of those accessories are just they're very difficult to find in the first place. But then if you do find them, they're so pricey that if you don't have the figure, you may as well look for a complete one.
Yep.
Now,
Some of those tiny pieces, like mentioning Tunnel Rat, those flashlights.
That I didn't even remember him having. So as much as I was good about keeping track of stuff when I was a kid, I must have lost those immediately.
Yep.
So are you guys completists in the sense of this figure, like Firefly, came with this specific walkie-talkie accessory, so it has to be that one? Or do you say, oh, well, here's this other generic military line, and that figure has a walkie-talkie, and I can just, it's still in the right scale. I can give that to my Firefly, and I'm good.
For me,
if I'm displaying them... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I need it to be Firefly's walkie-talkie, but I do not mind it being a reproduction.
Okay.
And I actually have purchased a number of reproduction weapons and accessories that are great. And for my person, I would never try and resell a reproduction as an original, but for my personal collection that's just going on my shelf, I'm fine with that. I would rather spend, $2 on that reproduction walkie-talkie than however much I would have to spend for, maybe up to 20, if you can even find the original one by itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it's I would prefer to display them with the original accessories, but I also have many of them displayed without any accessories, because if I find them, I'll add those accessories to them. Like my Flint does not have his shotgun. I don't know where it went. It was, it got a lot of play when I was a kid, but it's missing now. And he's just displayed without it. If I get a shotgun for a reasonable price, I'll add it to it. Don't really do reproductions, but I'm not opposed to them. I actually, if I had more time and more energy in my life, I'd actually love to do dioramas and stuff and use some of those repro parts to kind of litter the battlefield a little bit more. But yeah, just for my display, I prefer to have the original parts, and if I don't have them, then they just go without.
Interesting. See, I have a line of practicality where I do want the original parts, but once they exceed a certain price or a certain amount of difficulty I'm going to have finding them, then I'll throw in the towel. But I do want to. If a figure isn't complete, I don't put it on the shelf.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I won't put them on the shelf without all their parts, or at least without. If it's somebody that comes with a ton of stuff, and I happen to not for instance, if I had a Tunnel Rat that had everything except those flashlights, I'd probably put him up there. That would be okay, since I didn't remember him having those anyway.
But if your Zartan does not have his mask that normally hides in his backpack anyway, it's okay to display him without that.
Yeah, that would be fine. That would be fine. Yeah. If it's something that's not like a visible trademark accessory, that would be okay. Although, if I didn't have the backpack or the armor plates that are so frequently lost, I wouldn't put him up.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not picky, at all. And since I do mostly photography and diorama type displays, a lot of the weapons end up getting mixed up. And actually, just the other night, I was trying to work on a new set I'm building for Destro and Baroness, and I was looking at the pile of guns I had and was like, I guess I need to go online, because I'm not remembering specifically which gun was Baroness's.
She has the weirdest rifle.
Yeah.
It's that big, thick, chunky rifle that I was thinking of her as having more of a pistol. As a matter of fact, if I was just sitting, before I dove into the vintage stuff again, if I just had a pile of stuff sitting in front of me, I probably would have given her Destro's pistol.
Yeah, once I saw it, because that rifle does not look good in her hand. So mostly
weird choice.
everything I've ever done with her, I have like this very sleek looking, long range rifle, like a sniper rifle, and that's what I always give her. And I'm perfectly content with it. I know I have her weapons.
Yeah.
But it doesn't harbor my enjoyment if she's not displayed or used with the correct one.
I gotta say, since we're talking about that rifle, I think that stands out as one of the most, awkward and not fitting into the line weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly from the first 5 years.
Yeah, and she was a figure I never had as a kid. I had the rifle from, the red version from the Cobra accessory pack.
Yeah.
But I just never thought that it fit with her, and I figured if I did have her as a kid, I would have had her run around with a pistol, because that's what she tended to fire, and a little laser pistol in the cartoon.
Yeah.
So that's what I would have put in her hand.
And you just reminded me of something, mentioning the recolor version that came out in the weapons pack. I gave that red one to the Hiss Tank driver.
Ah.
Which looked really sharp. All right, well, that's enough. We can save this sort of conversation for the actual Audible Interlude podcast. Now that we've warmed up a little bit, it's time to go around and discuss some of the things that we love about G.I. Joe, whether it's issues of the comic or specific toys or whatever. Each of us have a handful of specific things that we love that we're going to talk about. And Noel, or since this is a G.I. Joe podcast, we all have sort of code names. Not that we use really, but just that it's a fun thing that we do. So code name Crapshoot, why don't you kick us off?
All right. So I'm glad I get to kick this one off, because I figure this is a popular one that other people might also want to choose. But they have been, since their inception in 1984, have been some of my favorite toys. Well, actually 85, I guess, technically, but they did come out in 84. Some of my favorite characters, my favorite toys in the entire line. I'm going to group them all together, specifically the original 3 Dreadnoks. And, of course, that's Torch, Ripper, and Buzzer. There were many others, but those are the 3 that really kind of started it all. And I guess I was, even though I didn't really know a lot about punk rock, I loved the look of punk rock, and to me, they were the punk rockers of Cobra, is what I saw them as when I first saw them. They were these apocalyptic, Mad Max inspired, biker guys. They had wacky backstories. They had these crazy weapons. I mean, you had one that carried the jaws of life, and one that had a chainsaw mounted to a rifle. You had, the stories. You had Buzzer, who was a snobby Cambridge professor who was studying Australian biker gangs and got so hooked into the lifestyle that he just became one. They were obviously in all the media. They were very much loved. Larry Hama used them all the time. Gave them an affection for grape soda and chocolate donuts. And I mean, the cartoon, they formed the band Cold Slither along with their leader Zartan. I mean, one of my favorite episodes of the cartoon. And one thing that I figured out when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I've always thought it was clever, was their names are Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. Just a little clever thing that Larry Hama threw into the file cards when he was creating their characters. So always loved the Dreadnoks, especially those 3.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of the Dreadnoks because they were so often the guys, like you said, in the cartoon or in the comic book. We saw them more really even than standard Cobra Troopers as far as actually having important roles in the storylines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the fact that they weren't even really technically members of Cobra. They were these mercenaries that were working for this, Zartan, which, to me, they, at first, I didn't even, grok the whole Zartan and the Dreadnoks being together thing, because they just didn't seem like they worked until you got to see the characterization in the cartoon and the comics. But Yeah, they were used for like all sorts of missions where you wouldn't normally think that these guys would be going.
Well, and the characterizations were kind of all over the map, but it didn't matter because they did always look the same way, and like you said, they had that fringe look of the dangerous guys.
Yeah, they were
the chaos bringers.
That's right. They looked tough.
Yeah, I loved the figures. The biggest disappointment to me was that I couldn't find any motorcycles for them. The Dreadnought cycle didn't come out until 1987, and I don't care for that all that much anyway.
Barely a motorcycle to begin with.
Right. So I was always bummed out that I didn't have motorcycles for these guys to ride, and I don't know that if 1/18th scale, now you can go into Walmart and buy 1/18th scale motorcycles that are pretty good. But I just couldn't. It was frustrating to me back then, but I did have my Mego Chips motorcycles that I had two of those because I had one for Punch and one for John. So the Dreadnoughts kind of swapped around on those when I needed them too.
Okay. See, they were usually just causing chaos with their crazy weapons. Torch was opening up the walls to G.I. Joe headquarters, Ripper with his giant blade, and Torch was setting everybody on fire. So, they didn't have much use for motorcycles when I was playing with them.
Unfortunately, we did get the Thunder Machine that you could load everybody onto.
Right, which is one of my favorite G.I. Joe vehicles of all time, but that's not the subject for me right now.
Christian, any Dreadnought memories?
Again, to me, in my play, they were just chaos. They weren't foot soldiers. They weren't going into battle like you would send your normal Cobra troopers in. These were the guys that were making a lot of noise as they went up on the G.I. Joe headquarters. And Torch was my favorite as a kid. And when the 25th versions came out, he was the first Dreadnought that I got.
Ripper was my favorite. I liked the Mohawk and his look, and then the that bladed weapon with the, I don't know, he just looked to me the coolest and the scariest, I guess.
And I guess since we're all going around with our favorites, I'm going to be the odd man out too. I'm going to say Buzzer, so we all liked one of the three.
Perfect.
Buzzer was my favorite because he kind of looked like Dee Snider in the face to me from Twisted Sister, I guess.
Yeah.
And I just liked his characterization. I liked his voice the best on the cartoon, and I loved his weapon with the chainsaw.
I will say Ripper made out the best when it came to weapons because his gimmick was the Jaws of Life. But like you said, that bayonet
can
gun
opener
that he had, Torch had his flamethrower, Buzzer had his chainsaw. That was it. And Ripper.
Yeah, I wonder how they decided
the weapon lottery.
I wonder how they decided that he got that cool rifle with the insane bayonet thing and the Jaws of Life, with the hydraulic hose, because we all know I love figures with hoses.
Yes. Until you got to find the hoses 35 years later.
I feel so lucky that lot I got had all of the hoses and then some. Although I didn't know which hose went with who, so there may be some that are wrong.
There are varying lengths of hoses, so you got to kind of match them up.
Yeah. All right. Well, at least we know once conventions start happening again that the three of us will not have to fight over our Dreadnought costumes.
That's right.
All right. I'm going to go next. My first pick for something that I love, something that's important to me from G.I. Joe, is Worlds Without End.
You stole my second one.
Did I?
Yeah.
It is a 2-part episode of the G.I. Joe Real American Hero 80s cartoon from Sunbow, and it's possibly my favorite cartoon story ever. It was written by Martin Pasco, whose name you should Google immediately. I didn't know this until I started sort of looking around for this panel. He wrote a number of titles for DC. He worked on Star Trek for Marvel. He wrote for every genre TV show that you loved in the 80s. He named Ookla the Mock from Thundar the Barbarian. I did not know this. He worked on Thundar the Barbarian, and they were walking by the UCLA campus trying to figure out a name for this creature, and he looked at UCLA and said, "Why not call him Ookla?" I right now I'm picturing Joe Crow's head just exploding with that knowledge, if he didn't already have it, which is entirely possible. He also won an Emmy for working on Batman the Animated Series, co-wrote The Mask of the Phantasm feature film, and unfortunately died this year on my birthday. I strongly recommend everybody, after you're done listening to this, Google Martin Pasco and look at the insane list of contributions that he has made to the pop culture that we all love. But anyway, so that's who created, and it's also noteworthy that he is the single credited writer for these stories, because a lot of times there were a couple of different writers working on these. But this is a story where a portion of the G.I. Joe team is trying to get the transmuter, that's your MacGuffin of the day, back from Cobra, and they get transported to an alternate dimension where Cobra won some years before. It's a pretty dark and intense story, probably the most dark and intense thing we saw from Real American Hero. And Steeler is a focal point of the whole story. He is expressing at the beginning, wondering what's the point of the fighting? What's the point of the war? It doesn't matter who wins. He's tired of fighting. He's tired of not seeing his family and his friends. And to me, this story arc with Steeler is the closest the cartoon came to representing a lot of the themes that Larry Hama tried to bring to the comic books about PTSD and about, the strains of war. It's big, and even as a kid, I recognized that these episodes and what these characters were going through was something special. But the biggest thing for me then was the fact that at the conclusion of the story, that most of our Joes get back home and they make a difference in this world, but the fight's not over, and Steeler, Grunt, and Clutch, 3 Joes who had been around from the beginning, stay in this alternate dimension to help fight Cobra's regime, and we never see them again. They're gone. And 80s cartoons didn't do stuff like that. Like, a character may show up for however long their toy is on the shelves and then just not show up anymore, which happened a lot in G.I. Joe. But these guys within the story left, and it was huge. And none of them were my favorite Joes, but it still had an impact on me.
Yeah, this was my second choice too. When Grunt, Clutch, and Steeler, essentially they killed off those characters the only way they could really do it in the G.I. Joe cartoon.
Yes.
That they said, we're not selling these toys anymore, but we're going to do a really clever way of getting them, off the shelves by having them stay in this dimension with the Baroness fighting this war.
With the good Baroness.
With the good Baroness, yes. And there's 2 words for you: Dreadnought Cops.
Yes, Dreadnought Cops. What a concept that is. With Zartan just sitting in the police station.
Yeah.
Sergeant Zartan or whatever the heck he is. Oh man, and what's interesting is this is some of the vehicles. We mentioned this on an episode of Audible Interlude. This was the first appearance of some of the vehicles before they even became toys. It was the first time we saw the Firebat was in this episode, and gosh, there was one other. We mentioned it for you guys. If you're listening now, you should go check out the Audible Interlude podcast to find out more tidbits about these episodes. Christian, thoughts?
I need to dig this one up. Unfortunately, my recent viewing of the cartoon has mostly been some Sergeant Slaughter research that I'm doing. So I've been watching those specific ones. So I'm totally drawing a blank on this episode.
Well, luckily,
wow.
this one has been on regular rotation on the G.I. Joe Hasbro YouTube channel. At least it was as of a couple weeks ago. So you should
know
be
what
able to
I'm
catch
doing
it there.
after this recording.
Yeah, this was groundbreaking, big. When you're a kid, you don't run into a whole lot of genuine affecting drama, and this definitely got me and left a big impact. All right, well, Christian, since Worlds Without End, you need a refresher on that. Why don't you go ahead and take us into your first pick?
Oh, right. So we've covered toys. We've covered the cartoon. Let's jump into some issues of the comics. Let's go back to G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issues 98 through 100, The Return of Cobra Commander. This was huge. I mean, this was ROM issue 52 huge to me and my friends. One thing the G.I. Joe comic always did, when they killed somebody off, they were done. They were gone. So when they had earlier killed Cobra Commander and showed how easy it would be, anybody can be under that hood or in that battle armor. Me and my friends were like, oh, this is it. And when Cobra Commander came back, it was like Larry Hama was able to go, here's all these characters that I had to include because of the toys, and now we're going to wipe the slate clean. And it was a Cobra bloodbath. Cobra Commander has his loyal Fred clones, which was a concept I loved as a kid. That had, when they thought he was dead, they had saved him, helped nurse him back. When he got Zartan, Dr. Mindbender, Raptor. They introduced Raptor during this storyline.
Yes.
And as much as I still can't wrap my brain around him as a figure, it was like Larry Hama was like, I don't have a choice, and I'm going to write him just as absurd as this concept is. It wasn't like he tried to make him, like, badass or anything like that. Like, everybody around Raptor kept commenting about, you're dressed like a bird. Like, we cannot take you seriously. But it's not even enough for him. His revenge against them was grandstanding. They're in a freighter. He buries that freighter inside a volcano and just leaves them there. And like I said, it's the Pentor, Zartan, Dr. Mindbender. Granted, Zartan, made it out alive. But during that whole thing, me and my friends were just, oh my gosh. Like, we were so excited every month when the next issue came out, because at that point we thought no one is safe. Like, there had always been little rumblings throughout the comic series of, Destro and Baroness, power play with Cobra Commander, and when they killed off all those other Cobras, it was like, oh, game on. And I still reread those issues because it showed that Larry Hama in the comic was writing a Cobra Commander we never saw on the cartoon and couldn't.
Yeah, I loved the Cobra Commander. I mean, when I played with my figures, I definitely had the comic book Cobra Commander in mind. Now, I'm not going to lie, I did like to use the cartoon voice because, let's face it, that's a fun voice. But he was an evil mastermind. He was not a buffoon. But I will say this, I have not reread the Real American Hero comics in years. I remember Cobra Commander coming back, and I specifically remember what you said about him burying everybody alive in the volcano. But it's been so long since I've read these, I don't have any specifics to bring to mind right now.
And then this is when Cobra Commander also comes back and starts using like 50-cent words every chance he gets, which I love. That's the way his character developed after coming back from the dead for like 2 years.
And I believe that's also he had gone back to the hooded look in the comic, because obviously when one of the Fred clones was the Cobra Commander before that, Hama had him in the battle armor because that was the current toy.
Right.
When he came back, we got him back in full Cobra Commander regalia.
I got to ask Larry a question about that because, typically it was a pretty realistic portrayal of war. When people died, they were gone, and G.I. Joe and Cobra Commander was one of the few exceptions to that rule, at least early on. And, I said, why did you kill Cobra Commander off and then later bring him back? And he said, because Hasbro wanted me to. So,
and that was the thing. Like, we were, growing up reading comics, by the time I was in 6th grade, me and all my friends were like, nobody stays dead. You never took it seriously. But G.I. Joe was one of those comics that when somebody died, that was it. You didn't see them anymore. So,
well, if anybody can get away with that in that comic, it's Cobra Commander because, he's head of this cutting-edge technology-based, evil terrorist group. So he's going to have somebody who can probably bring him back to life more than anybody else.
Well, and there are two factors that go into the permanence of death in G.I. Joe, and that, one is, as we were talking about before, once somebody's not on the shelves anymore, then Hasbro doesn't want them in the media anymore. But also, Larry Hama has always said it was very important to him to show the cost of war.
Yeah.
He when characters died, he wanted them gone, so it fit within his ethos for them to not come back.
Every death pretty much had an impact.
Yes.
In the storyline. Where, he was just going off and just killing a bunch of characters randomly here and there. A few major characters died during the run, sometimes in large batches, but when that happened, it was to make a very, very serious point about warfare.
And this was the only time where it sort of was all built around what's considered milestone issues in a comic. Any other superhero comic, it's like, oh, issue 12, somebody dies. Issue 25, somebody dies. Issue 100, somebody dies. And with G.I. Joe, you never really saw it coming. It would just be any issue. It wasn't like a big event. It was more, like you said, the cost of war.
Well, and it wasn't like a cover story. Like they didn't have, in this issue, Bazooka meets his end, which granted didn't happen in the comics, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I brought that up because I know that's a sore spot for you. All right.
Still one of the greatest G.I. Joe cartoons, but man, Oh.
Yeah, we will. If everybody subscribes and tunes into Audible Interlude, we will absolutely be reviewing G.I. Joe. Oh shoot, what is it?
Resolute.
Resolute. In the coming months, 100%. With a lot to unpack with that one, but first we have to move on. Oh, and I forgot. My code name in Christian, I am codename Phantom Troublemaker. A lot of thought went into that one, let me tell you. And Christian, codename Legion Cub, and also follow Legion Cub on Instagram for that toy photography that you mentioned. That just, I think it was today when you put up that Jabba's skiff picture.
Yeah.
That one's awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, you guys be sure and follow him. All right. We're going to come back around to Crapshoot. What is your... Well, we know what your number 2 pick was. What is your alternate pick?
Well, so the name of our podcast, as you know, is Audible Interlude. It is inspired by an issue of the G.I. Joe comic, Silent Interlude, which I love, but that's not what I'm going to be talking about right now. That is issue 21 of the original Marvel run. They have tried many times to kind of recapture that magic over the years in Marvel and other comic series as well. But nothing captures that better than 9 minutes of action in the second live-action G.I. Joe movie, Retaliation. There is a scene with the ninjas on top of some mountains that is probably my favorite action movie scene of the last, 25 years on film. Otherwise, both of the G.I. Joe movies, I can take them or leave them. They're fine. I don't dislike them. I don't love them. But that scene, it's 9 minutes of the movie. It's Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow are battling up on top of the mountain. They chloroform, Jinx comes up, they chloroform Storm Shadow, and they put him into this body bag. And all of the Red Ninjas, and all this is inspired by Silent Interlude, the character design of the Red Ninjas and Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes battling.
Well, and even the temple that they're in is very similar to the Silent Castle.
Yeah, even the temple. So they all come after them. Then Snake Eyes just haphazardly throws Storm Shadow in this bag off of this mountain, and they go into this crazy zipline sword fight battle with not a word of dialogue spoken for 9 whole minutes. And it's mind-blowing. It's just epic to watch. And even the backstory of how John Chu came up with that scene and first started getting ideas for it was essentially arranging his furniture to resemble the mountains that they were planning on shooting this in Vancouver, and then got Hasbro to send him a bunch of action figures so he could actually stage the action scenes with zip lines across his living room.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I said it's the best part of the live action movies, and honestly one of the best scenes in any G.I. Joe visual media. To me.
Yeah, I actually just watched... Well, I watched both of the live-action movies with my son a couple of weekends ago, and he thoroughly enjoyed them and asked me why there hadn't been more, and I said because nobody will commit to G.I. Joe, but maybe this year that'll change. Yep. We know the Snake Eyes movie is coming, and I do wonder if because in general, everybody loved the scene that you're talking about. It's incredible. It's even beyond being great G.I. Joe. It's just great action movie cinematography. I love the fact that they're just straight up Red Ninjas.
Yep.
Right out of the comic and everything else. It's amazing to watch, and we both sat there just jaws dropped the whole time because it's... Describing it or thinking about it, it seems like it might be a little ridiculous, but watching it, it's all logical. It all flows from one point to another. At no point does it break your suspension of disbelief.
Right.
Yeah, it's a fantastic scene, and I enjoy the Joe live action movies, but yeah, I don't love them, but I do love this part of them. And especially as a nice palate cleanser for the terrible acting from the Blind Master.
Well, and it's. I mean, the action's great too, but everything about it, the color palette is so striking because you've got Snake Eyes in his all black. Storm Shadow is mainly in a body bag the whole time, but even the body bag is kind of similar to his costume in the white. You've got Jinx, who's not wearing red. Her costume for the movie is this yellow and black costume, and then all the red ninjas.
Which I'm fine with because you want to differentiate her from the red ninjas.
Yeah, and I actually like that costume a lot.
Yeah.
I think it really works for the movie. So just all of that color palette on this, which is supposed to be the Himalayas, it's it was shot up in the mountains of Vancouver, but it's snowy and there's some greenery on the rocks, but it's all very, for the most part, it's a very like neutral backdrop. So everything that happens on it is just really striking. Whenever you see one of those ninjas coming to view, and they're dying like Warner Brothers cartoon characters, just whacking into one another and just falling off and into the abyss. But yeah, every bit of that is just visually just beautiful.
See, listening to that, my heart is starting to thaw a little because I remember the second movie being better than the first, but still not enjoying it. And I know on our podcast, I am the too many ninjas guy. But I think I will try and watch the movie again with a more open ninja-loving mind.
And I'm the same way. I'm G.I. Joes and ninjas are not my favorite part of G.I. Joe. I tolerate it to a certain extent, but this is so good. Like I said, this is not just great for a G.I. Joe scene, as Dave was saying. This is a great action scene in general. It just so happens to also be G.I. Joe, which gives it a little extra love for me.
I think with the live-action Joe movies, the secret... Well, and honestly, the secret to anything, take the things that you recognize and that work and that make sense and love them and the fact that they happened, and the stuff that maybe doesn't seem contextually as much like G.I. Joe, you just... Well, it's a movie. I've got to enjoy what there is to be enjoyed, and, everything else just... We'll move along. And speaking of Silent Interlude, for the listeners, if you would like to hear us review Silent Interlude, please tune in to the September 7th episode of Audible Interlude. All right, I am going to go next with my number 2 pick, one of my favorite action figures of all time, one of my favorite G.I. Joe figures, changed my life in 1986 when they released the Cobra Battle Android Trooper.
Yes.
When I was a kid, I only had one. I wanted tons and tons of them, but I don't know that I had any really troop builders when I was a kid. I had a couple of Cobras, like oddly enough, I think I had a multiple Cobra infantry guys. I'm sorry, multiple Cobra officers and like one regular Cobra. But my mom wasn't big on just buying a lot of the same figures. So I had one Battle Android Trooper, which meant in my play it was a much more unstoppable powerhouse than the extremely fragile, explosive things you saw in the cartoon. But I just remember being blown away by the colors and the design. Obviously, that lenticular chest piece was just awesome. The interchangeable hand that came with the claw, the laser, and the torch added so much play value to this guy. The black and yellow color scheme was great. But looking at it now, like, think about how simple this figure, if we want to make a disposable trooper so that in the cartoons we've got somebody that G.I. Joe can actually shoot and destroy. Well, they didn't need to put as much detail into this figure as they did, but it's loaded with all the folds in the fabric and the detail on the boots and the thigh strap thing, and like it's a fully developed figure and not just some sort of generic troop figure. It's very striking. You know it the second you see it. It makes for a great costume because you see them basically any convention you go to. I love seeing somebody in a Battle Android Trooper costume. And it was used in everything, the cartoons, the comics, the books. I just absolutely love that original Bat. But I love all the variations we've seen since then as well. They've done a ton of them. Obviously, it's a popular idea, a popular concept. I think one of my favorite things they've done was a troop builder set that came out in 2003, right? 2003?
Mm-hmm.
It came with 3 updated bats, 2 Inferno bats that are made out of translucent red plastic, and then the bat sort of commander Overkill, who had this opening translucent green chest with a little gun pops out of. And I think that might be the last mail-away item I ever ordered. I cannot think of anything after that. But yeah, that original Bat figure I love, and the whole concept of the Battle Android Trooper is great. And has been used, in all kinds of different properties over the years. So what do you guys think about the Bat?
Awesome toy. Awesome. Loved it. And like I said, you were saying that you have your Bat go through and he's just like plowing through the Joes. And what I loved about it, because he had those the arms that were interchangeable, like as he would go through it, like parts of him were being ripped off by the Joes, and he's still fighting because he's an android and he doesn't feel pain, and he can just go until he physically can't move anymore. And so like that arm would be off and he'd still be coming after him with the stub of his arm. That was a frequent feature in my Joe play as a kid.
I never actually had the version 1.
Oh, no.
Bat. I eventually, yes, did get him, but when they came out, did not. I think my mom actually got him with a lot of G.I. Joe figures that she, a lot that she had found at a yard sale. And as much as I do like the Bat 1, when my younger brother got into G.I. Joe is when the Bat version 2 came out in the orange. And I really fell in love with that figure. The face mask. It was, to me, like a sort of blank Maskatron from the Bionic Man. And luckily, or thankfully, I was old enough at that point to have disposable income, thanks to weekend jobs and stuff like that. So me and my younger brother, had quite a few Bat 2s, and it was awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting that they changed it to that orange, I guess in the second year, in 87 maybe?
No, 91.
Oh, was it that? Well, because
there was an alteration in the coloration from the original Bat too.
Yeah,
it was just a variation.
The first ones that came out were black and yellow, but later production runs it's
fairly subtle.
Yeah, but it is orange.
Yeah, it's still considered a V1. It's not considered to be a variation enough to be a different version. But
and the file card is even different.
Yeah,
it's a Bat and not Bats, which is actually correct because it's a Battle Android Trooper. There is no S in that. Other than the fact that there are many of them.
Right, which they did a lot. Like, the eels. I didn't figure that one guy was called an eels.
Right.
Eel.
Of course, Hasbro would have been interested in the idea that there should be lots of them, right, kids? Take your parents to the store and buy lots of eels and bats. That's an appealing thought.
Did the mail-away Overkill come with his talking backpack, like the single-carded figure?
That was later than I was paying attention, so I am not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, those are my, getting into my dark years of G.I. Joe. I I'm familiar with Overkill in retrospect, but I don't think I even knew who he was until, just a few years back.
Yeah, I didn't
he
know
was
who
one of my younger brother's favorites, and I knew that he was the commander of the Bats. But that gun that pops out of his chest was very Cops.
Yeah. That was I wasn't familiar with Overkill until I got that mail away set and he was in there and I was like, who is this guy? With his awesome translucent chest. All right, we have to move on to our final. You're closing us out.
All right.
Code name Legion Cub. Bring it home.
Well, I'm going to bring it home with the Wolverine.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
This was, of all the Joe vehicles I got as a kid, this went on every single adventure. Just the sheer volume of missiles that were in it just took my young imagination to a lot of destructive places. And in my canon, the missiles, after you shoot one, it automatically replenishes, so you can just keep shooting and shooting and shooting. And also that it came with CoverGirl. So you had not only a female vehicle driver, which is rare in of itself, but she was driving this heavy artillery machine. I held on to my Wolverine, over the years. It lost a lot of missiles. It lost one of its treads, which were just the hard plastic treads. It's not like the plastic ones on the Mobat.
Right.
This thing had so much battle damage.
And good luck on that tow rope.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh, that's right.
Yeah, because that plastic actually shrinks over time. So finding one of those intact is, practically impossible.
Well, I'll just look for a reproduction.
Yes.
Yeah, they're all over eBay.
Yeah, I loved that vehicle. It was for me, that was what they called in to get things done. Like, it was the bad boy, the big, heavy-duty, we got to blow this fortress to hell, get CoverGirl on the line, and bring in the Wolverine. Any other Wolverine thoughts, you guys?
This is one that I got a little bit later. I got it as a mail-in, so I did not get a CoverGirl with it when I had it, but it became one of my favorite toys to bring into battle. It's the perfect size because it's not like a huge bulky tank like the Mobat or the Mauler would have been. It's comparable to like a equivalent of like the Hiss tank in size. So it's great. It's got a lot of play value. Yeah, it didn't have the working treads, which a little bit disappointing when you're a kid. But it's just a fun little fantasy vehicle, but realistic looking enough to feel like real military, even though it wasn't based on anything in the real world.
All right, you guys, we have just enough time for a speed round. I asked each of you to think of one ridiculous, weird, or not great thing about G.I. Joe to bring up. And we're going to close this thing out just with a quick mention of what that thing was. Noel, why don't you start us off?
So this is the thing that is I just couldn't wrap my head around as being something that would be possible in G.I. Joe, and it seems super obvious, but it was the Star Brigade Lunatics Empire, the characters of Lobotomax, Carcass, and Predacon. They had aliens in G.I. Joe, and I was not into it at the time, but I'm pretty sure I saw those being advertised, and I was like, well, I'm glad I'm not playing with that anymore.
Yeah, super weird figures. For a long time, I didn't think they even existed. But yeah, odd, weird concept.
Yep.
Christian, better or worse than ninjas?
Worse.
All right, my bad thing is literally every single vehicle released in 2003. They're all terrible. They don't look like G.I. Joe products. I will leave it to the audience to go to yojo.com and look up these 2003 vehicles, but boy, are they just chunky plastic turds.
Were they doing Built to Rule at that point?
That's not what I'm talking about, but yes, they were.
Oh, those were awful.
Yeah, yeah. But no, this is all like just thick plastic, chunky Fisher-Price looking stuff. It's all terrible, except for the Conquest of Cobra Mountain playset, which is awesome.
Oh.
All right, Christian, once again, wrap us up. What is the thing, aside from ninjas, that just leaves a bad taste in your mouth?
The fandom's hate for the Cobra Law. And I know that's sacrilege to say, but with a lot of the interviews and stuff that I've been reading about, it was a concept that was forced on them by Hasbro. I think there is so much more potential there than what the writers gave them. So if you ignore the cartoon and you look at the possibilities, I think there's more there than what people give it credit for. So I don't understand the blind hate.
Well, since this is just a quick bit, we can't go deep into it, but we will have a deep discussion.
That's why I did it.
we will have a deep discussion about Cobra Law at some point in the future. Everybody, thank you for listening. Please follow Audible Interlude Podcast on Instagram. And, oh gosh, we're on Twitter too, and now I can't remember what the handle is because I had to make it something weird because Twitter is terrible. At G.I. Joe Audible on Twitter. You guys, thanks for sitting down and talking G.I. Joe, and we will be doing it again really, really soon.
Yeah, sooner than you think.
Yo, Joe.
Cobra.
Here are all the ways that you can support the Needless Things podcast if you enjoy what you just heard. Follow Needless Things podcast on Instagram. Join the Needless Things podcast Facebook group. Do answer the 3 questions, but once you're in, you can interact with everybody here on the shows, share your own news. I am all about people putting themselves over, so if you've got a cool project that you're doing, you got your own podcast, your own website, whatever, share it in there. I want this to be a big community full of people interacting. Go to YouTube and subscribe to the Needless Things YouTube channel. Check out the reviews in there. The podcast is also available there, and I'm still not sold on how worthwhile that is, but I got a couple of comments on the audio podcasts on YouTube, so people are listening to them there. But subscribe, share. I'm not going to ask you. I know this is a big thing on YouTube, or at least my son tells me it is, to do the bell, which is, I guess, notifications. You guys, I don't want you getting a notification on your phone every time I post a video, which, granted, isn't that often. It's twice a week. Well, depending on how many podcasts go up, but as far as reviews and stuff, twice a week. But that just seems invasive to me. I don't want to get a notification every time somebody I'm following on YouTube posts a video. I go to YouTube when I have the time, and I go through my subscriptions and watch stuff. That's all I ask of you. And then also to share the videos if you enjoy them. That's the important thing. Go in there and share those videos. Get more eyes on them. I would do it for you. You know why? Because I love you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Needless Things podcast. You're the best. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Downcast, or in the ears of a Trader Vic's employee. Love you, mean it, uh-huh.